So recently, I had a free couple hours, and instead of doing something productive, like I easily could have done, I saw that the new Captain America movie was out on Disney Plus. So I decided to sit down on the couch and turn my brain off. However, my stupid ADHD mind just wouldn't let that happen, as it was alternatively coming up with ways to fix its mess of a narrative. And rather than just letting those absent-minded thoughts float off into nothingness and actually become absent-minded, I figured, since I have a YouTube channel, I'd jot all those ideas down and present them in a somewhat sensible format. A format I have sort of used before, but not in a long while. Yet I have a feeling this video is going to be a bit longer and a bit more extensive. So, from slight changes that could have been made to what we got, to the missed opportunities that could have been taken from the original script and leaked concept art, to my own rewrites and character inclusions I feel would have allowed for more cohesion across Marvel's recent phases, I want to look at how to fix what could have been a great launch into a new era for Marvel and a genuine introduction to a brave new world. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, your nihilistic optimist, and I never hated this movie. I have very much disliked a couple of Marvel's recent-ish movies, but this was never one of them. Enjoying it enough in the theaters, I even made a review for it at the time, expressing all the things I didn't like, but staying positive as I didn't think it deserved the drumming it was receiving. For me, I always thought if they'd done a switcheroo in the trailer and made it look like Ross hulked out on the battleship instead of the White House, or just not showing him at all, then that twist might have worked, but I also know that that's just me, and that quick fix wouldn't solve every underlying issue still present. Like this bad bit of exposition where Sam says,
"Yeah, I'll hold for the president."
He knows Isaiah disapproves of him talking to the government. There's different people there than the ones that locked him up, but it's still the same corrupt system. But the writers needed a lazy way to communicate it was President Ross that Sam was talking to. So they threw that line in for the dumb audience members on their phones and only half paying attention, which is a whole nother discussion because I find it fascinating and terrifying that movie studios are actually crafting movies and stories that are tailored to be half paid attention to. But that's a small part of what needs to be fixed in Brave New World. And lazy inclusions like that, which are probably just ADR inclusions mandated by some studio head, are as numerous as they are impossible to stamp out. I could sit here all day and just list each of them off, calling for them to be cut, but that's obvious. Besides, my intended changes are much more top-down. But in that, let's just start right at the beginning, because originally, this movie started poorly. And I thought about making a whole video about Marvel's lack of studio credits for this movie, but I think that all comes down to them just not being confident in this. Frankly, I can't think of a single good reason to not include the intro credits. As Deadpool puts it, they get you hyped. So slot that in, and go ahead and keep the opening with President Ross's inauguration. I think it's a nice tone setter and sets up the new status quo pretty well. Though I would change just one thing about this opening scene, because after showing Sam watching this on the news, why don't we show some other notable characters watching the same program? People who might just come up again in this movie. And during that, we can get a sense of who all of these people are just from the way that they react to the news that Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, which has nothing to do with the Thunderbolts, don't ask, is now the leader of the free world. And still sticking with the brave new world we're familiar with, right at this opening is another great time to show the leader's cell and maybe a small hint of a very, very large forehead. That's right, I'm getting rid of Mr. Bubblegum Head. For now, I won't say too much on him, just because he's meant to be a big reveal. Well, of sorts, Feige already revealed he was returning from 2008's The Incredible Hulk a long time ago, and there's no way to fix that, but we can at least feed into the narrative of a covert ops prisoner that's just as shadowy as he is clearly still in control. And here we also see his strobing mind control at play, though for now it's just some confusing lights. And I've never been a fan of mind control, even in the most fantastical of worlds, and it is a pretty cheap way for the leader to gain control of his situation, rather than demonstrating how terrifying his intellect can truly be, but it might as well be kept. Yet there's no time to think about the leader's weird flashing lights, because we're off. already in the thick of it with Sam flying to the next action scene, which will be my first major departure from what we've already seen. Because while he's flying off, a throwaway line can be added mentioning that Sam preferred to do this mission alone, turning down offers to help from other known heroes with this very hostage situation. And Joaquin Torres as Falcon can even add that he's been doing a lot of that lately and should just let some people help, because even he hasn't been able to go out on missions with Cap that much, something Torres is visibly upset by. But again, there's no time to dwell on it, because Cap is already flying at supersonic speeds down to Serpent Society's infiltration of some kind of base. And I might as well mention it now, because a suit with vibranium pretty much everywhere runs into the same narrative problems Black Panther did, which is that you're not really worried about the main character when they have this magical metal protecting them at all times. So with character drama in mind, we can either remove the vibranium and scale down the action, or scale up the people Cap's fighting. That, and if you're going to introduce the Serpent Society as a rogue modern-day Hydra-esque militant group, why not include some powered people or just them with augmentations or power suits? I know it's not grounded, but you know what isn't either? A jetpack wingsuit. And I'll be honest, at this point with action scenes, if it's not going to be choreographed and shot like it was in Shang-Chi, or at least showing us something we haven't seen before, then I'm sadly just not interested in any more regular hand-to-hand fight scenes. An overgeneralization, but one that I've found to be true more and more lately, at least with Marvel. And I even thought about switching all this action up and replacing it with mercenaries like Bushwhacker or someone, since we're already getting a bunch of Hulk villains, but I think including Serpent Society represents the evil side of teamwork best. So throw in all these guys from the concept art and pre-reshoots, each of them with a defining feature like blade arms, extendable little slithering thingies, and a classic, the strong one. Would they be played by the cast Marvel had already assembled, such as Rosa Salazar or WWE's Seth Rollins? Sure, why not? I'm not confident Rollins would do good outside of an action scene, but I have been proven wrong on that account before. But here, after having to fight a few suited up Serpent agents, Sam barely scrapes by, but manages to pull through in the end, as he always does. And aside from maybe one or two that he knocks out, the rest of Serpent Society slinks away. But Sam still saves the hostages and retrieves the package this has all been about, which is the same canister we see in the movie we got. But this time, let's give that a little bit more narrative weight. Take the time, maybe even interrogate one of the Serpent agents you caught to ask why they were trying to sell adamantium, and to who. The answer to which is a red herring, because it's all a ruse set up by the leader to get Cap in play at the exact moment he wanted him to be, but there's intrigue there nonetheless. And after that, Falcon can pull Cap aside and ask him, since he's already basically taken him under his wing, why not let him go out and do some more field work? A request Sam doesn't really have an answer to, since all he wants to do is deny him the same chance to prove himself that he was after so long ago. A bit more eagerly, but a similar situation nonetheless. So with a smile, Sam decides the best course of action is to scare Torres off, and tells him he knows the perfect guy to teach him the fundamentals. And as we all know, this is where we're introduced to the gruff, brick man of a wall that is Isaiah Bradley. Well, reintroduced if you saw Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And frankly, if I really did have it my way, I'd just make it a truth, red, white, and black adaptation, but that's still an option down the line, so we can't count our chickens on that just yet. But what we can do is give Isaiah infinitely more drama for the actor to chew on. Not that he doesn't have any. In fact, his performance is what saved the emotional side of what we got. So just add 10 to 20% more of that, whether it be more of Isaiah breaking down at the thought of dying in prison, something he had painfully experienced before, or just what I talked about in my review, diving into the differences and sad similarities between the prejudice these two have received. Either way, the movie missed the opportunity to make me weep like a baby, and I want to rectify that. As a matter of fact, Isaiah should be the heart of the narrative, where all the emotion stems from. I love Sam, but he's not the most developed. But don't worry, if you haven't already noticed, I'm attempting to fix that as well. And preferably without the lazy exposition I mentioned up top.
Yeah, I'll hold for the president.
Sam and Joaquin are invited to the White House, and they convince a begrudging Isaiah to come with. And I'll give it to the directing of the original movie, because its scenes developing how anxious Isaiah is going into what he even refers to as the belly of the beast are great. Obviously, I'd add just a smidge more focus on that, but that's just with hindsight. And I mean, if I were Isaiah, I'd still be hermiting around, afraid to open my door for anyone. So it hurts when he's getting over that anxiety, happy even when visiting the White House, only to face immediate tragedy. But prior to that, upon arrival, Sam is taken aside by Ross and is asked to lead the new Avengers. A name that doesn't mean anything to us yet, and certainly not anything to Ross or Sam, because they're just talking about reestablishing the old team, but a line that might be fun to look back on. And with all of that, Sam is puzzled, wondering why he, of all people, would want to sponsor an Avengers team, but also mentioning he hasn't been in contact with any of the Avengers, even the new ones, or one semi-adopted onto the team post-Endgame. Side note, should that become a BBY situation, like before Battle of Avengers Mansion? Ba-bam. Anyway, we're continuing on and adhering pretty closely to what we know. So, during the president's speech, Ross is attacked by a few mind-controlled people around the room. One of them, as we all know, I honestly don't know why I'm restating all of these events like it's not known, whatever, is Isaiah. And what needs to be stressed at this point, aside from how devastating it is to see Isaiah going back to prison, is how perfectly and randomly coordinated the attack was, pushing some political intrigue that was sorely missing, making it clear that everyone chosen to be mind-controlled was in a position of enough political power to influence global mistrust, including Isaiah, an apparently rogue and dangerous super soldier. And he's in prison, but Ross and the public are very much afraid of him. And I mentioned before that I don't like mind control, and it's certainly on the silly side, but it also deepens the impact of Isaiah being confused and scared, inspiring Sam to get to the bottom of this conspiracy and clear his name. Plus, the mind control, along with the character reasoning I'm adding in, gives Sam's decision to not call in any of his superpowered friends some sense, considering he can't trust anyone. And Sam does contradict himself by working with Torres and a couple US Navy SEALs, but at least Falcon made up for that with this pretty smart stunt by playing the trigger music, which obviously stays in, but that's much later on. Before that, Ross lets Sam into his war room to discuss options. And given Ross's life was threatened, he's pretty heated and wants to go on the offensive. On who exactly? Nobody knows. But Ross does have a suspicion he's not about to bring up. Yet before Sam can pry that information out of him, he's shooed out of the room and is forced to track it down himself. And let's take just a small detour, because I guess now is as good a time as any to bring up Ruth. And she was never a problem to me, because the movie needs someone to represent a side of the government who Cap needed to convince of this wild conspiracy at play. And I honestly like that she's an ex-Black Widow and how that contextualizes how they all took up different lives and jobs. But because of the politics, just take her out and replace her with literally anyone. Also, get rid of this nothing Secret Service agent character, make Ruth and her one person, and simplify the whole thing. But with that detour out of the way, let's get back to Sam's base, because there, Sam is angry and wanting to act. To be specific, act alone, even asking Falcon to leave. But he refuses, and Sam considers it a lost cause, seeing in him a certain stubbornness he recognizes maybe a bit too much. Yet during their argument, they manage to triangulate the location of a shadowy prison. Is that how they find Stearns in the movie? I think they actually do triangulate a call from Sidewinder's phone, and I just rewatched this movie, but I genuinely can't remember for sure. Really shows how memorable that moment is. But in my version, before leaving, Sam takes the time to look at a picture of the old Avengers team, reminding him he could just call his Avenger friends and solve this entire issue with ease. Yet he doesn't, sneaking into that shadowy facility to meet the ringleader behind it all, the leader, who, unbeknownst to Sam and Joaquin, is in full control of said facility. And after searching through some of Stern's research, we hear a spine-chilling monologue about control or something smart and foreboding, and the same Samuel Stearns some of us remember steps out from the shadows to reveal the 3-foot-long green forehead we were promised a decade and a half ago. And pretty angry at him, Sam moves to subdue the leader, but takes a devastating sucker punch, and we pull back a bit to reveal the superpowered Serpent Society gang now surrounding them. Sam realizes he walked into a very obvious trap.
It's a trap!
How do these Serpent agents get these power suits, you ask? Well, they could easily just get them from the leader developing them, or you could quickly tie in that the power broker is now supplying anyone with the right price, dangerous super tech. But with said distinct power suits, they kick Sam and Joaquin's butt, but don't quite succeed in the objective given to them by the leader, with Cap and Falcon just managing to escape with their lives and world-shaking information. Because during the leader's monologue, he arrogantly let slip that he had been working for Ross for more than a decade, all the while setting in motion plans to dismantle everything. But before Cap can confront Ross with what he's learned, he finds out that Ross is on a battleship headed to face another fleet at Celestial Island. In the movie, Sam and Joaquin go to some random military outpost to get exposition from Sidewinder, but none of that is necessary. What is necessary is that here, while he's on his way to Ross, after getting absolutely manhandled by some of the members of Serpent Society, Sam first battles with not being good enough. A struggle right there in between the lines beforehand, and one he faced in his own show, but a conflict everyone faces again and again every day, as it's constantly changing and becoming something we deem impossible, until we climb that mountain and succumb it one step at a time. Only Sam isn't quite there yet. Coming so incredibly close to that epiphany, kinda opening up to Joaquin about how he's had Isaiah on his mind this whole time, almost losing it worrying about how he's handling being back in prison, Sam still won't admit out loud that he needs help. Because his biggest flaw is that he's stubborn. Once he's decided on something, he won't change his mind. Which 100% works for me, because like every typical hero archetype, every Cap, comics included, simply has to have a fatal flaw. I mean, Steve's barely counts because he places too much value on every single life put in front of him, which is like saying in an interview that you care too much. But I've mentioned before how right now, Steve is the perfect character representing everything moral and decent. Until this July, that is. Nevertheless, the point is, the only help that Sam is willing to accept is Falcon's. Maybe there's a favoritism there that can be pointed out later. But during this scene, Falcon also makes mention that the music the leader uses could be copied and used whenever they wanted to make sure a person wasn't already mind-controlled. Something Falcon sadly doesn't get to utilize in this version, but should still be the person to think of it. And after all that, we get the Cold War dogfight at Celestial Island. And of course I'm keeping it, because A, it is a great way to finally address the world-changing massive celestial head sticking out of the earth besides just mentioning it. And B, it's awesome. Most of which I did enjoy, though all I ask is that during the dogfight, everyone's got a bob and weave between the fingers. Because come on, that's right there. But on the battleship, the leader calls Ross to have him Hulk out and destroy everything. Yet, despite a close call, Ross manages to keep his cool, something the leader is upset by, but doesn't eliminate plans C through Z for him. Yet up in the air, to wrap up the dogfight, Falcon takes some kind of metaphorical bullet, or maybe a literal one. I don't know. But with Joaquin badly hurt, Sam flies him to the nearest battleship to ask for medical assistance, where after first aid, they tell him Joaquin will need to be hospitalized for a while. And it's here where the full weight of the responsibility behind being Captain America comes crashing down on Sam. So far, he'd been doing it with a wink and a smile, something the most idealized version of a perfect hero and symbol are supposed to do, and can absolutely be interpreted that way, but I think it would go a long way to differentiate from the Cap we got before by highlighting Sam's fatal flaw whenever possible. Because Falcon might have gotten some cuts and bruises from their fight with Serpent Society earlier on, but Sam was too stubborn to admit the truth then. Yet with Joaquin hospitalized, there was no denying it anymore, because if he wants to clear Isaiah's name, Sam is going to need help. Especially just when it comes to physical brute strength. Even with his vibranium tricks, he simply isn't enough. But rather than this being a lesson in failure, Sam realizes he's not shirking his responsibility by working with the Avengers. It isn't cowardly to hide behind stronger teammates. It's courageous to be their leader and tactical to know when you're outgunned. And if there's one thing Sam's proven since his introduction, it's that he has a level-headed, moral, and tactical mind, which is why I wanted to push that and have his level-headed patience tested. But I should probably mention where all of Sam's superpowered friends even are, which I've at best glanced over so far, but so has Sam. And first off, I'll just skim through the Avengers I'll deem too far away, given they're way too strong and would just solve the problem in a second. There's Thor, who I doubt Sam would even be able to reach in the first place. Black Panther, who I'll say is busy in Wakanda. Doctor Strange, who's off doing magical stuff in another dimension. Hulk, who, I don't know, is off doing space stuff with his son. And Captain Marvel, who I think is actually on Earth currently, but sadly just didn't have her phone on her. But of those Sam is able to reach, there's both Ant-Man and the Wasp, Shang-Chi, She-Hulk, War Machine, who had a weird stint as a Skrull, but nobody remembers that, Hawkeye, and Spider-Man, the last of which I'm not sure would be able to be contacted, but so long as there's an Avengers way to reach him, Sam would. And I feel Ironheart would be on this list, but her show just hasn't come out yet. But all of these people are called in by Sam, who plays the trigger music for them, either individually or once they're together. I would prefer for a cool hero shot reveal in the very next scene, but it would make much more logical sense for Sam to play it once everyone was in one place. So just in case, one can be used to subdue another, mind controlled by the leader. I suppose with as smart as Stearns is, he could force someone to do some kind of double bluff with the trigger music, but I'm not going that deep with the mind control. It's already a flimsy enough plot device as it is. But here, with or without the hero shot I wanted, the Avengers move to take out the leader, who naturally has a contingency for all of this. Because the moment one of them makes for the leader, let's say Ant-Man because he's the dumbest and most brash, he's almost hit by a Serpent Society blade, but is blocked by the shield. Sam's back in the exact same situation he was in before at the leader's prison, but this time, those big bad Serpent Society agents are just not a problem. And while the Avengers handily defeat them, we cut to Ross, who before a big presidential speech, decides to call his daughter. And after a long silent treatment, his call is finally picked up and he hears his daughter's voice in I don't even know how long. But it quickly turns sinister as Betty tells him he'll never change and that she hates him, twisting the knife further with each word. Something Betty would never do? Well, kinda, but not here, because as per usual, Betty didn't pick up the phone. A manipulated voice chat thingy set up by the leader did. Not his last trick, but one that sends Ross spiraling. And just as he's ushered out to give his speech, we cut back to the Avengers tying up the leader and a very sleepy Serpent Society. And I've always believed if you want a genius villain, you need one moment where the rug is pulled out from the audience and the characters in the movie. Because it's here, when the leader seems most defeated to Sam, maybe in this shot, but with the big forehead, he reveals to Sam his ultimate plan. Because Ross himself is about to become the hulking monster he's always hated, destroying half of Washington in the process, killing lots of people, and ruining Ross's reputation forever. And there's nothing anyone, not even the Avengers, can do to stop it. Rushing to the site of Ross's speech, which isn't too far away, they woefully do not make it in time. Set up by the leader, the loudspeakers around Ross blare out a damning recording while he is already falling apart delivering his State of the Union address. And it's the final straw that broke the camel's back, because Ross can't take the pressure anymore. Unwilling to let anyone in who isn't his daughter, he hulks out. And I'll go as far as to say that there's some great stuff in the original Red Hulk fight. Cap blocking a tree thrown at him and then looking up to see Hulk right there. That's awesome. Yet, all of that is very short-lived, which makes sense for what their fight was going for, but I want more. So in my perfect world, I'd first off make it so it wasn't just Cap, which doesn't make any sense, because it should be the Avengers. That should be the minimum requirement of what is needed to take down a Hulk, and even then, it should be near impossible. And I'd also change it so that this fight was the entire third act. If it wasn't clear, my version of this Captain America movie is about Sam not wanting to accept that he needs the Avengers. He wants to prove that he's Cap all on his own. And being Captain America isn't defined by the team led by them, but is by the community they inspire. So crafting an ending where he doesn't just encourage a large population from afar, but rather intimately works with on a team would be so much better. Plus, it's more fun. We may not be getting a smaller scale Avengers movie between Endgame and Doomsday, something I've asked for multiple times on the channel before, but we can at least get a feel for this new team dynamic before Doom obliterates it. And I won't do a play-by-play of my whole reimagined Red Hulk fight, because then I'd be here all day just clacking action figures together, but I will explain a little bit of what I want. Because what I've wanted for a while now is the return of a Savage Hulk being an unstoppable rage machine of death. Banner's return to being a Savage Hulk, for my money, is more than likely. In fact, I have a video in the works about that being a whole future saga. But if Red Hulk is going to be introduced as mindless, then you kinda have to make him physically unstoppable. We're obviously not worried about any of the Avengers. It's not a high stakes fight, but there should be plenty of tension to mine in not letting any civilians get hurt. And during this, we can also get a callback to Sam's fight with Isaiah when they were training earlier, with obvious accentuated camera moves to really make it clear what is going on. And I mentioned how this fight could show this Avengers team dynamic, yet seeing their teamwork alone, with Sam calling out maneuvers and having to adapt on the fly how to best steer everyone to not die, would be a dream come true for me, with this being the unspoken reformation of the Avengers. I know they did technically come back after Civil War, but I appreciate how, while the Accords have been repealed, they still had lasting consequences. But all of this could have been tying up loose ends and making what could have been a great wrap-up for Phase 5, with the Thunderbolts being the start of 6, which is more for the nerds at home who care, because honestly, Marvel's phases have never felt more superfluous, but I think this new placement would help. Also, if you haven't noticed, I've been showing clips from some animated movies that don't necessarily apply, but that's just because we don't have a lot of teams trying to take down a Hulk, something these fixes would rectify. But to end the fight, the original did kinda have it right, because Sam should end up talking down the Hulk. I'm not sure that could work, and it certainly didn't in what we got, because him and Ross don't have that deep of a relationship, and I didn't add anything because I can't see them developing any. Yet I feel it is most in line with Sam's character to find a way to talk Ross down, because counseling is his superpower, even therapizing Steve Rogers, the ultimate therapist, in his introduction a decade ago, which is all part of Sam accepting his limitations with being better served as a part of a team, specifically leading them. His power is not in physical strength, but in guiding others. And once Ross is taken care of, he's brought to the raft where Sam visits him with Betty. And here, actually seeing and talking to her, Ross finally communicates and reconciles with how he's tried and failed to step into this new role that he thought he was ready for, something Sam takes to heart before he leaves to let them have more time to themselves. And instead of having this dull, nothing end credit scene with the leader right there in what looks like the very next cell over, show Isaiah settling in at home, finally at peace again, only for his grandson Elijah to come barging in about some offer he received to join some new super team. But before Isaiah can express the disapproval on his face out loud, or even ask what this new team is, we cut to black to wrap up the movie as a whole. And that is my rewritten Captain America Brave New World. I ended up sacrificing most of the spy thriller, Cold War for Adamantium aspects of the movie in favor of an Avengers movie in disguise, but that's one thing I love about Civil War, and what could have been passed along to the very next Captain America movie. But did you enjoy my changes? Or even this video in particular? I have plenty more armchair expert rewrites that I have in the can, so comment if you'd want more of something like this. And as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.